Super Bowl Sunday, I can recall sitting in the other auditorium when Brother Howes caught some people sleeping. He said, "You wouldn't sleep during the Super Bowl." And I said, "I wonder if I would." Never had the chance. So y'all are missing another chance tonight. So, all right, I'm excited to be here. This is my disclaimer. God has mercifully blessed Frida and me beyond comprehension. I promise you, I can't think of any family that's been more blessed than mine has. And it's not, I didn't do it. I didn't pick out my parents. I didn't pick out where I grew up. Frida didn't do the same. God has carefully and wonderfully orchestrated it. In the last 37 years, he's been orchestrating it in this church. So we're debtors to y'all. And when can I let up? When the wheel of eternity starts rolling, you're going to hear me go, whew. Well, not till then. I believe a man excels at what he thinks about in his spare time. I have chosen to think about my family in my spare time. It's where, my night with the boys is with my sons and now my grandsons. And that's just the way it's been, and God is blessed. I wish I could tell you I had a real spiritual verse that helped me keep going. But the verse I think that keeps me from slowing down is Galatians 6, 7, and 8, and 9. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to the flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. I can't let up. I can't let up. And I'm married to a woman that if I let up, the next thing I'd be with her feet running over my back because she didn't let up. So it's really, really a blessing. I want to tell you a story about, I used to think the Old Testament was filler, so your Bible was real big and everybody noticed it when you carried it. But you know what? The Old Testament is a picture book of folks who are facing the problems that we do and what happens. And so I'm going to tell you a story out of the Old Testament about two families who were facing judgment, trying to raise their families in a perverse and wicked generation. One family made it, one family didn't. And I'll kind of do some contrast in that. Before we do, I interrupt this message to get a word with our sponsor. I mean, his time, you don't have to buy his time. You get it not $1 million a minute like at the Super Bowl. I mean, this is the one that makes our life possible. This is the one that makes sure you remember to breathe that night and your heart remembers to beat. This is the one that supplies your air for you every day. Have you thanked God for your air lately? Aren't you glad the government doesn't have to give it to you? Right? This is the God that made our frequency of speech the same frequency we can hear. Otherwise, you couldn't communicate with your wife. It's amazing. All these things just fell into place, including getting us all here tonight. What a God. Let's pray. Lord, sure do love you, appreciate you, and thank you for this day. Oh, God, you're great, you're wonderful, you're wondrous, and God, you're patient because you put up with us. Please, 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 God, speak through me to these folks tonight. Help us to find some things that cause us to love you more, serve you better, and make a difference for God, for good, and forever. Amen. I have a PowerPoint. I have preached against PowerPoints at the college, but I got one tonight. And I'm comparing Noah, Lot, and us. And let's see. Yeah, there it is. Question number 1. How is the family environment? You say, oh, things are so tough. Let's see how it was. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. And God saw that that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of his thoughts, of his heart, was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. God's upset. Let's see how it is with Lot. And the Lord said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know. God's upset with them. How does he feel about us? Look at in 2 Timothy 3. This know that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection in San Francisco and other places, truce breakers, I put that in, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, from denying the power thereof, from such turn away. Looks kind of bad for us too, doesn't it? Let's see, it's 1964. Eons and eons ago, another dispensation when nobody had any fun. We'd been married for several years, and my wife said, we need to have little feet pattering around the house. We tried a cat, that didn't work. We tried a dog, that didn't work either. She had something else in mind. But in 1964, Lyndon Johnson had just been elected president over Barry Goldwater, and the Great Society was kicked into motion. That was a political answer to everything that was wrong. And Frida wants to start a family, and I'm sitting there thinking, is it fair to bring a child into a generation like this? It's amazing how God works. At that time, the assistant pastor at our church down in Georgia was a man who had gotten his master's degree under Albert Einstein at Princeton University. I went to him and I said, Brother James, what do you think? He said, Pete, throughout history, God has always blessed the righteous remnant. If you don't raise it, who will? And we got started, and I went to the Bible looking at what could be the answer in a perverse generation. Next one. Now, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to raise my family. Look at who found grace. Let's see, Genesis 6:8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 19:19. Behold now, this is Lot moaning and groaning. Behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. Noah found grace. Lot found grace. And then it says in Ephesians, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, the gift of God. Let's see. Noah's got problems. Lot's got problems. We got problems. Noah found grace. Lot found grace. We found grace. We're all on the same page so far. You say, maybe I can relax. No, I would like to do that, but you can't. So what do we do next? What is every family doing? What do you do in a situation like this? Let's find out. This is what Noah, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generation, and Noah did what? Noah walked with God. Wonder what Lot's doing. Genesis 19:11. There came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face to the ground. Noah's walking with God. Noah's walking with God. Lot's into politics. What are we doing? Look at 2 Peter 3. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up, seeing that all these things shall come to pass. What manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness? Are we looking to God for the answers, or are we looking to Washington, D.C.? Wonder, whose approval are we seeking? Boy, you know, they're trying to take crosses down everywhere. I got one of the crosses we had in pastor school. I got it mounted on 30 inches of concrete base in my yard, right next to the road. And I got rope lights all the way around it where everybody going up and down the road can see it. I'm not trying to seek the approval of them, anybody but God. Get excited. Let it show. Did you know, there's people right now, I would guess, in New York City, stripped to the waist with stuff like Broncos written across their chest. And you say, aren't they good fans? Fans is short for fanatic. And I love the Denver Broncos, but nobody on that team died for my sins. Yeah, wonder who we're excited about. Man. Well, anyhow, wonder what God wants us to do when we're facing judgment. Boy, he really unloads on Noah. You can hardly read it because it's too small. But God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Room shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch, and this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, 450 feet. The breadth of it, 50 cubits, 75 feet. The height of it, 30 cubits, 45 feet. Noah said, I can't build this in my basement. Right? And then God goes on. He goes on all the way down to verse 22. By the time has God ever said something to you and you say, whoa, that's enough, let's stop here? No, it didn't. All the way down to verse 22, and said, thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, according to all. That's more than additional or detergent, okay? All. According to all that God commanded him, so did he. Boy, God unloaded on Noah, and Noah said, I'm going to do it all. Did you know for 120 years every day, Noah sang one day at a time, Sweet Jesus, one day at a time? Did you know every night for 120 years, Noah and his son sat around and picked splinters out from under their fingers? Can you imagine Noah calling the lumber company and say, hey, I need a big load of lumber? There wasn't a lumber company. We need a power pole. There weren't any power poles. God gave Noah an insurmountable human task, and he did it. Well, let's see what Lot's doing. Then said the men unto Lot, hast thou any besides son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city? Bring them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Noah built an ark. Lot, get your family out of town. Who had the easiest job? Why do you think God gave Lot an easy job? He figured if I got that much out of him, I'll be doing good. What does God say to us? Oh, I hate these verses now, but look in Colossians 3. Wives, submit yourselves unto your own husbands, as is fit in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and be not bitter against them. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing unto the Lord. Fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men, knowing that of the Lord you shall receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Wow. You say, man, it's hard for me to do all this stuff. How did Noah do? I think the greatest wife in the Bible was probably Mrs. Noah. Do you think she got invited to the local bridge clubs? Can you imagine her going out and everybody saying, her husband's a nut? When I was in Chillicothe, Illinois one time, a guy was building a concrete sailboat in his backyard. And everybody's going by to look at that concrete sailboat. Noah, for 120 years, was building something that wouldn't even fit in his backyard. You know, I'm just tired. We've been fundamentalists for so long, can't we let up? I bet Noah's wife never said that. Yeah, wife. Boy, oh boy, who are we trying to serve? Well, let's see how they responded to God's command. How are you responding? Genesis chapter 6, thus did Noah, according to all that God commanded him, so did he. Thus did Noah. He did it all. He didn't say not necessarily every day. I don't know if you say stuff like that, but I do. And what does Lot say? And Lot said unto him, oh, not so, my Lord. Behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. Behold, now this city is near to flee to, and is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said unto him, see, I have accepted thee concerning this thing, that I will not overthrow the city. Anyhow, Lot's having trouble getting out of town, isn't he? You know, I think maybe the most exciting thing I read in the Old Testament, after 120 years, when Noah got on the ark, his wife and children followed him. You say, that's not much. Well, they've been putting up with a lot of junk for 120 years, and now all the animals are coming. Can you imagine all the people laughing at Noah, wondering what's happening when the animals are marching through town? I bet they got a little antsy, or a little elephanty, but anyhow. And the animals are all on the ark, and God says, get on. Do you think they had good plumbing on that ark? Wonder what the air conditioning was like. Noah could honestly have said God's will stinks. Right? But his family followed him on the ark. Boy, that gets me excited. Oh, by the way, who's the only person in the Bible that Jesus told us to remember? Lot's wife. Your wives listen to this. Your husbands better listen to it too. Wow. So how did they do? Well, let's see. Lot's having a whole lot of trouble getting his family out of town. And Noah went into the ark. This is the last one. How did their families respond? And his wife and his sons' wives with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, and which married his daughters. You know, most of the time, sons-in-laws do marry your daughters. It's amazing how this Bible makes sense. Anyhow, Lot went out, spake unto his sons-in-laws, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. Hey, the old man's got religion. Right? But he'd been sitting in the gate. He'd been into politics and all that kind of stuff. Everybody go, we're thinking. Where did Lot's trouble start? Let's see. Lot's trouble started when he had so much junk. He and Abram and Lot had so much stuff, they didn't get all their camels in the garage. They had to park them outside. Their garage was filled with stuff. God, just give me some more stuff. He gave them a lot of stuff, right? Nobody in here has their garage full of junk in their car outside, I'm sure. Okay, yeah, wow. But they had so much stuff, then they had dissension. Boy, my wife has a lot more stuff than I do. I have to fight for closet space. But anyhow, all the stuff that you're trying to get cause trouble. But Abram was a gentleman. He said, Lot, you can have first pick. Now, everything that Lot had and all this stuff was due to his uncle Abraham. He should have deferred to Abraham for a lot of reasons, but he didn't. If you read it, it says that he lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt when you cometh into Zoar. Now, I've got a lot of things I'm going to check on when I get to heaven. One is, where did Lot find his wife? I think he found her in Egypt. And I can hear her now. And Lot's looking around making a choice, and she says, oh, honey, that reminds me of home. Maybe. I know folks, married families that have come to Hiles-Anderson College, and the wife put up with it for a while, but then she got thinking about home, and they left. The wife. Okay. But anyhow, what did Lot do? He pitched his tent toward Sodom. He pitched his tent toward. And the very next verse said the people in Sodom were really wicked and perverted. Right? What influences where you live and where you pitch your tent? Wow. Hope it's not your wife. I hope you're taking good care of her too, though, by the way. Wow. Pitched his tent. I think Sodom and television come from the same root Hebrew word. He pitched his tent toward television. None of y'all have ever done that, but you know how it is. You bring in all that evil into your house. What influences where you live? 37 years. 37 years ago, scared to death, I left the well-watered hills of East Tennessee to come to the garden spot of Indiana, Hammond. Right? Here's the interesting thing. Took a 60% pay cut. I said to my wife, Frida, I believe it's God's will for us to move to Hammond. And she said, okay. It's amazing, isn't it? She didn't say, I told her about the pay cut. We didn't have any idea where we were going to even live. But she said, we do it. And by the way, I was reasonably successful in my job at the University of Tennessee. I was a tenured professor. I had it made for life if that's what I wanted. Well, we left. Wow. For over a year before we left, every night on my knees beside each of my children's bed, I prayed, I said, God, for Kelly's sake and Kevin's sake and Kristen's sake and Keith's sake, I can't make a mistake. And we left. Wow. Amazing how that works. I'm not sure where Lot got his wife, but you wouldn't believe where I got mine. I was a junior in college, trying to live without God and keep him out of my way because I figured he'd cramp my style. But I was losing the battle because everything in God's creation pointed toward him. Finally, in my junior year, I read a statement in my thermodynamics book. The second law of thermodynamics has increased this author's conviction that there is indeed a supreme being in whose hands lies the destiny of the universe. I read that statement and I got cold chills. It's kind of like if you're married, husbands, and you're in an argument with your wife and you suddenly realize you're wrong and she's right. You know those cold chills that start right here? And you know how you drop to your knees, you grab her around the ankles and say, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. No, you don't. You back up and say, that has nothing to do with it. But anyhow. But I read that. I went back to my room, shut the door, got on my knees beside my bed and said, God, I believe you're there. I don't know what to do, but if you show me, I promise you, I'll do it. 3 days later, 1960, Kentucky football game. A pretty blonde girl came and asked if the seat next to me was saved. She's pretty, wasn't she? I said, no. The only place she'd go on a date with me was to church. I remember the first time we had a legitimate date, and I took her back to the girls' dormitory. My 1956 Dodge, push-button transmission, dual antennas, dual exhaust, a 3-tone paint job. I found a dark parking place right in front of the door, and I pulled in, punched the neutral button, pulled the emergency brake, shut off the headlights, turned off the ignition, slid across the seat. We had bench seats and no seat belts in those days. Put my arm around her, and I said to myself, good move, Pete. I turned her with puckered lips. She's sitting there with her hands in her lap, looking at my puckered lips when she said, let's pray. That's where I got my wife. Glory to God. Hey, we've made up for that missed kiss a lot of times since then, okay? But I'd been dating a lot of different girls. But this girl loved God, and she didn't have to tell you about it. You could look at her and see it. Where are you going to find your wife? Wow. Man, oh man. We got up here, and we pitched our tent toward First Baptist Church. If there was an activity going on, we were here. At the high school, at the college, grade school, we were there. And some of the activities I thought were really stupid, but I never told my kids that. I just did it. That man over there, he learned how to be a youth pastor on my kids. Man. But we were involved. We stayed busy all the time. What do you have to do for entertainment? One Friday afternoon, we've been here a couple of years, and I picked up the kids after school and said, well, it's Friday afternoon. We don't have anything to do. What do you want to do tonight? And my children said, could we just go home? Yeah, it really, really works. And, boy, are you mature enough to handle adult entertainment? Adult entertainment. But anyhow, adult entertainment, intelligent blondes, government workers, that's an oxymoron, right? Maybe you ought to get the kind of entertainment that everybody does, right? Wow. Do you think Lot felt, important as a community leader? How important would you feel if you were leading a community of perverts? Man, I'd make sure I kept my clothes on tight. Not too tight, but anyhow. Yeah. But I'm at the University of Tennessee, loving my teaching. Lots of students are getting saved. We had 16 of them at Howells-Aronson College at one time. That's how Brother Howells found me. But anyhow, and really, really doing good. But the environment wasn't very good. Drugs, booze, and sex were a way of life. I could tell you stories going on and on and on. Student walks into my office. Say I started talking about Jesus in the classroom, and boy, everybody in big college, 25 or 30,000 students, most of them knew about it because the teachers that weren't talking about Christ were griping about me. But students would come by my office, and I'd have to go soul winning. I just sat and soul winned. They came in. But a girl comes in one day and says, if you can't help me, nobody can. I said, what's the problem? She said, every time I go to my dorm room, there's a guy in there with my roommate. You want to send your daughter's place like that? The difference between a state university and a shady lady home is the university's accredited. But anyhow, you'll get that in a minute. But anyhow, how in the world could I take a paycheck from someplace I didn't believe in? I was uncomfortable. We ought to be uncomfortable when we're doing worldly stuff. Maybe, just maybe. Wow, it's amazing. You say, I don't know if my kids would like it. Check with them. Check with my grandkids. No, Grandpa, do we have to go to church again? Yeah. You say, wonder why my kids, how you make your kids like going to church. How about liking it yourself? Yeah, can you imagine what happened if I said, Keith's younger, I say, well, Keith, it's Saturday. You know what that means? Oh, no, Dad. The weather's bad. That's okay, Keith, we got to go. We got to go. We'll dress warm. Dad, if I have to sit outside and watch another football game in weather like this, I'll die. No. Get excited about it. And by the way, let's see. I have grandkids that rode a bus to church in Indiana, Arizona, in Oregon, and they're all liking it. Boy, if my kids are going to enjoy what I enjoy. Several years ago, we were going to have a family portrait made. And I said to my daughter-in-law, she coordinates the clothes for those things. I said, Dawn, let's have a casual portrait this time. What color should we wear? She said, what do you mean? There's only one color, orange. Rocky top, it'll always be. But anyhow, and my kids to this day, they're probably sitting there right now worried if Peyton Manning's doing okay. I know I am. Yeah, get excited. And so you have to have something set up, but you have to have some order too. Years ago, I decided there were more things that people thought I should do. Did you know we always know what everybody else should do, but not ourselves? There were more things that people thought I should do than I had time to do. So I set up a pattern. Number one was my wife. Number two is my children. Number three is my job, in that order. You say, where's God? Who do you think gave me all three of them? Right? And so, if someone comes and asks you, are you going to be able to do something? Not if it interferes with my wife, my children, or my job. Did you know no is a legitimate word in the Bible? Jesus said that. Your mother and brothers are outside. He said, tell them I'll see them later. He didn't add exactly that way, but that's what he meant, okay? And so my priorities, my wife, my children, my job. What do you do for leisure? Frida and I decided apart from our job, we would do nothing that didn't involve at least one family member. It's amazing how that worked out. Boy, our social events involve stuff like science fairs and candy bar sales and bus routes and junior churches. Guess what we're still doing? Science fairs, candy bar. I'm doing it with grandkids. Sometimes I have to do 2 and 3 science fairs a year. It's wearing me out. That's a lot big, but it's really working. Maybe you ought to do it. When our kids were doing science fairs, we started in September on the science fair. And we stayed excited about it. And then when my kids did good, all the parents whose kids didn't do good got mad at us. You know how it is. There's people who work hard and succeed and people that don't work that gripe. You might know some like that. Okay? And then we adopted some policies. We built every aspect of our life in this church. We never criticized authority. Not ever, ever, ever. Did your children ever get a bad deal? Oh, yes, they got bad deals. But they never heard me say anything about it. They never heard my wife say anything about it. It's amazing how that works. And then we started a family altar. When my kids were at home, every morning we read a chapter of Proverbs to correspond with the date of the month. And I told my children, I said, at 6:45, you've got to be at the kitchen table. You've got to have breakfast. You've got to be dressed. You've got to be ready to go to school. Now, with all that's the case, what time do I need to wake you up? And they told me what time I need to wake them up. I said, I'm going to call you once. If you don't come, I'm going to pour water on you. It's amazing I'd call them once, and sometimes all I had to do was turn the kitchen faucet on, and feet are hitting the floor all over the house. You know, there's more innovative ways of punishing people than whipping them. You know, my son Kevin, his job was to take the trash out every night. And it seemed like he never remembered that. One night when he went to bed, he pulled back the covers and there was the trash. He never had to be reminded after that. You know, but so anyhow, a family altar. At the family altar, we read a proverb, and each member of the family told what they were facing that day, if they had any tests, if they had any ball games, or anything like that. And then we prayed. That whole thing took probably less than 15 minutes. And every night at supper time, we shared the answers God had given us to prayer. It's amazing. When we did a bus route, we did it as a family. I remember somebody came to my daughter one time, 1982, that was eons ago, and said, would you do an Oriental Junior Church? I'm running a bus route, teaching a Sunday school class. I started to say, I said, I'm too busy. And my daughter Kelly was there. She said, Daddy, we could do that as a family. You know what I did this morning? Junior church. You know who's there with me? My grandkids. We're still doing it. It's amazing how that works. Psalm 119, verse 65, says at midnight, I will rise and give thanks to thee for thy righteous judgment. I don't know what that meant to anybody else. Probably 30 years ago, that verse convicted me. Every night, actually about 1 or 2 in the morning, I get up, I get out of bed, and I spend some time with the Lord. When my kids were home, I prayed outside their bedroom doors. Now I just go down and lay on the living room carpet and thank God for how good he is. There's no interruptions at that time, just you and God. And God has blessed that beyond belief. It's amazing. I sincerely believe God has blessed us beyond measure. And I also have found I have no greater joy than to know my children walk in truth. You say, how long do I have to keep on? Someone asked my son Kevin, how long is your dad going to run a bus ministry? He said, until they build a 72-passenger car. But anyhow, I think that's true. But Noah, think about this. Built an ark for 120 years. Spent over a year on that ark. Came up, had to set up housekeeping. When they got off the ark, I could hear Mrs. Noah saying, here's the list, go down to Walmart. No. Finally, the crops came in, and they're having a feast. And after all that time, Noah said, whew, and he let up one time. It cost him one son, right? I'm not going to look at my children and say, which one of you am I going to write off just by letting up? I can't let up. I can't. Yesterday morning, I did what I do every Saturday morning. I made my first bus call. I've got 3 grandchildren buried at the cemetery. And I went out and I laid on their graves. And I reminded God that I loved him. I told the devil out loud that I hated him. And I said, I want to be resolved to work a whole lot harder today, devil, than I would have if you left me alone. Maybe, just maybe, it'd be good if we decide to do something for the children. You say this is a tough time. It was for Noah, and it was for Lot, and it is for us. But we can make it. I'm going to ask you to stand right where we are. Heads bowed and eyes closed. Maybe it'd be good, we're going to have an invitation. Maybe it'd be good if you came down here and said, maybe got your wife, and came down here and say, God, if you give me the grace, I'm going to face this judgment. I'm going to weather it, and I'm going to rejoice at the victory I'm going to get. Dear Lord, please, please help us to resolve to not let up. Help some folks to decide that they're going to get along and be the right kind of parents. Help some kids decide that they're going to obey. And God, let's not mess up our inheritance. Help us, Lord, to not criticize the authority. Help us to realize that they're like us. They make mistakes too. Maybe we ought to just shut up and forgive them. Help us to do that. I pray you'd help some families to establish a family altar. I'd pray you'd help some daddies to get up in the middle of the night and pray for their kids and wife And I pray, God, that you'd help me to keep going. With heads bowed and eyes closed, y'all pray and y'all come.